What's it like living in San Diego with MS? Well, I know because I live there, but I don't live there anymore. There's a reason for that. Watch this and find out. Also, wow, those are really ugly drapes in the background. I didn't even notice that. I'm going to have to do something about that. Anyway, I'm just going to read off here. I just took my Kesimptas and my head's kind of buzzy. I don't know if you're on that stuff or not, but you would understand. So I've got a couple notes here. If you're like me, you're always looking for interesting places to live with your MS because, well, let's be honest, MS is greatly affected by where you live. And today, while I had some downtime because it's hot outside and I'm kind of stuck inside because of the heat fatigue thing, I wanted to go over all the places that I've lived. Now I'm going to cut this video into 4 or 5 different episodes, and that will allow you to choose which episode you have interest in, and that will be defined by those specific places. I've lived all over the country, and I've learned a lot about the silly disease and how environment, livability, accessibility, healthcare systems all impact this. And it has been hard lessons learned, I will say, at the least. I think anybody with MS would say that. But there are some places that have really great healthcare systems, have really great accessibility, and there are places that have not great healthcare systems and make living with MS even more difficult than it already is because you're dealing with external factors outside of just the MS. So we're going to talk about those too. We're going to cover climates, cost of living, accessibility, and healthcare. Why don't we hop on my bicycle and take a ride up the coast of San Diego while I talk about what I loved about San Diego, what I didn't like about San Diego, what I learned about San Diego, and why ultimately my wife and I left San Diego. Let's do it. So again, I'm making separate videos for each location so that you can skip the areas that don't interest you, though I do recommend watching those too because there are some really good tidbits and all that. Let's jump right into it. A quick summary. I'm almost 48. I was diagnosed in 2018. Though I've had symptoms my entire life, my diagnosis took almost 10 years. I have walking, vision, heat fatigue, and cognitive blah blah blahs as my main symptoms, and I'm currently on Kesimpta to hopefully slow the progression. I was on Ocrevus for a while. I'm a dad, a husband, a brother, and a son, and I'm also an inventor and a YouTuber for a living. So that's me. Let's hop on my bike and take a ride up the Carlsbad coast while we talk about San Diego. Carlsbad's kind of a city near San Diego. It's in the same county. Watching this bike ride is way more interesting than watching me talk about MS. So this is the first installment of this series, and it's about San Diego. I lived in San Diego within 2 miles of the coastline for about 10 years, starting in the early 2010s. The overall experience was simply awesome. As a recently married guy with a beautiful and super smart lady by his side and no kids, we had an absolute blast. San Diego was a beautiful place with, at the time, a seemingly perfect weather. However, while we lived there, the weather started to change, but I'll get to that. San Diego gets its nickname America's finest city for a reason. Here are some of the things that make it a fantastic place to live. Well, fantastic weather, right? San Diego boasts sunshine 266 days of the year on average. If you love spending time outdoors and dislike super cold winters and super hot summers, San Diego's pretty awesome. I mean, it is an outdoor paradise. With beautiful beaches, mountains, and deserts nearby, San Diego is a haven for outdoor enthusiasts. Surfing, hiking, biking, kayaking, snorkeling, scuba, fishing, you name it, you can probably do it. And if you can't, you just drive a short distance and find a place where you can. It is really cool. It's got a thriving city life, which I really can't speak that much to because I'm not a city person and I never spent much time in downtown San Diego, but I can say that it's got a really great set of microbreweries and some incredible venues for events. Whether you're a family looking for a safe community or a young professional seeking career opportunities, or even a retiree desiring an active lifestyle, you can't go wrong with San Diego. It has great neighborhoods for all that stuff, and they really do cater to your needs. And beyond the city, San Diego is close to other exciting places like Tijuana, which I personally do not enjoy, but I know a lot of people that do. And Los Angeles, you can go 90 minutes north and you're in Los Angeles for a day trip where you can do a ton of different stuff. And even better about being on a day trip to Los Angeles, you get to leave at night before LA turns into LA at night. You can easily enjoy a weekend getaway and explore day trips in every direction. You could go out to the Catalina Islands for the weekend. It's really, really cool. So let's talk about the weather a little bit. San Diego coastal areas enjoy a mild Mediterranean climate year-round with warm, dry summers and cool, wet winters. Here's kind of a breakdown of average temperatures. The warmest month is usually August, and that's a high of around 78 degrees. Though recently it's been getting a lot hotter there. My friends that still live there say they wish they had air conditioning in their coastal houses. What about the coolest month? Well, January is the coolest with an average of around 64. So let's look at this. In August, you're looking at an average of 78 degrees, and in January, you're looking at an average of 64 degrees as a high. I mean, this is crazy, right? If you have multiple sclerosis and weather affects it too cold or too hot, you're kind of in this like area where it just doesn't change very much. In fact, I'll go ahead and say it since I live there, the weather gets kind of boring. I've been in places where you got to stay on your toes because things get crazy with weather. That's not San Diego. San Diego's very much the even-keeled girlfriend. Like, it just doesn't have a lot going on. But for MS, boring is good. And that's what I found. We can also talk about the average water sea temperatures. And they range from 58 degrees, which is darn cold, but with a wetsuit it's bearable, to 72 degrees in like August, early September. And I'll tell you, here's a tip you may like as someone who's lived there. September, when all the people leave, all the tourists leave, and all the people from Arizona go back to Arizona because it starts to cool down. September is by far the best month, at least in my opinion, to be in San Diego. The tourists are gone, the water's still warm, the beaches aren't crowded, and the tourist pricing goes away. And that's really nice. And the tourist traffic goes away and things become more predictable as people get back to their day-to-day activities. It's just a pleasant, lovely place to be in September. And overall rain for the entire year doesn't really happen. I mean, you get some precipitation between December and March. It's 2024 right now. They got pounded with rain and it caused a lot of damage and a lot of flood. So when they do get these events of like rain and wind, outside the Santa Ana winds, which is an annual thing, they're not ready for it, and it hits them hard, but they don't deal with it a lot. Overall, San Diego's coastal areas are known for their pleasant sunshine and comfortable temperatures, making it a great place to enjoy outdoor activities most of the year. So if you're like me and you're an outdoors person, but you have MS, and you have all the things that affect MS that are related to the outdoors, I mean, you can hardly go wrong with San Diego. But before you open Redfin and start looking for property there or for rentals, you need to listen to the rest of this episode because there are some big caveats with San Diego. Because on paper, it looks pretty good. And it was pretty good for me. But, San Diego and myself, I'm at fault here too, I'm not blaming just San Diego, allowed my MS to go undetected while it progressed for many years because of the incredible weather. Because of the weather, I got a lot of exercise and I spent a lot of time outdoors. And I kept too busy to chase any answers to these crazy symptoms that kept coming up. And when I did go to the doctors, they explained to me my symptoms were a result of over-exercising. Muscle cramps, pinched nerves, blah, blah, blah. You probably heard the story too if you have MS. My cognitive issues were dismissed because it was thought that my job was too stressful and demanding. And yes, my job was very stressful and very demanding. And that definitely contributed, but what it was doing was triggering my MS and causing other problems. Now let's talk about the healthcare environment based on my experience. Again, this is just my opinion, not anybody else's opinion. Well, it could be somebody else's opinion, but it's definitely my opinion. I've lived in a lot of places, like I said before, and I've had a lot of healthcare experiences. However, San Diego's interesting because getting a doctor's appointment, especially with specialists in San Diego, is no easy task. You cannot underestimate this, especially if you have MS. The healthcare system, in my opinion, is overburdened beyond its ability to be effective. And while San Diego is known as a hub for research and innovation in health sciences, their patient population suffers from inadequate health care. This is based on my personal observation and is my opinion and only that. But believe me, if you have MS and you need access to your care team as much as I do, San Diego probably isn't a fit for you. So based on my experience in San Diego, I experienced a lot of delays and miscommunications, which delayed my diagnosis and ultimately let the disease progress well beyond what it should have. All right, now let's move on and talk about accessibility in San Diego. If your MS is the type that has caused mobility issues like mine, you're pretty safe in San Diego. Being a city in California, they take accessibility very serious, and getting to and from places, plus in and out of places, isn't as bad as I've seen it or experienced in other parts of the country. Wheelchair ramps and adequate handicap parking are commonplace. Also, it's super bike friendly, which is awesome because I found it to be particularly great to be able to get on my bike and get to places on the days my legs weren't working very well. Furthermore, you're not contending with frozen surfaces. You know, that's always fun on canes or wheelchairs. And shoveling driveways or putting snow chains on your car, it's not a thing either. So that's awesome. Again, boring climate. We love boring climates when MS is being bad. Let's move on to livability of San Diego. This one breaks my heart because I really love San Diego. It ticks most of my MS boxes, exercise boxes, and lifestyle boxes. But the reality is, San Diego is so expensive to live in. It feels like an everyday struggle to pay bills, much less save anything for later. And that's dang depressing and super stressful. Two things that caused my MS to go into overdrive. The last few years we lived there, my wife and I worked so hard just to pay our rent that we never had time to go to the beach or enjoy a lot of what San Diego has to offer. If you're on disability because of your MS or for some other reason, this whole cost of living thing needs to be a serious consideration. I mean, gas, $5 to $6 a gallon back then. It's even more now. Groceries are insanely expensive, and California has the highest tax rate in the nation. And let's talk about utilities like electricity and natural gas and all that stuff. We were paying easily 2x to 3x that we've paid anywhere else in the country. So if you're like me and need to take random days off because your MS is being a butthead, living hand to mouth is not a viable option. The livability or lack thereof is ultimately the reason my wife and I decided to leave San Diego. We wanted to live in a place where we lived and then worked, not the other way around. And especially with MS, that is just not a viable option. There's one last and very important part of San Diego that impacts everyone who lives there, and that's the price of real estate. Whether you rent or own, the price of real estate is going to impact your life in a big way. As of 2024, San Diego ranks as the most expensive city in the United States to live in, and the cost of housing is a big factor in that calculation. Here's a graph of how the cost of real estate has increased over time. And here's a graph of median household incomes in the same area. It doesn't take a genius to see that these two graphs don't play nicely together. Now, this isn't meant to be discouraging, but rather a reality check to those who move first and pay later like we did when we were younger. The odds of us ever owning a home that we could actually live in and wanted to live in was quickly slipping away. That being said, San Diego seems to be a great place to gain asset value if you can handle it. I guess it depends on what you are willing to sacrifice. For us, we weren't willing to give up on health and our free time so that we could drive by and look at the beach on our way to work and then maybe catch a glimpse of it on the way back from work. I said in the beginning that the weather in San Diego was great, and I emphasized was. And there's a reason for that. After the environment started changing while we lived there, the California season for fires went from about 3 months to like 6 months. And now our beautiful blue skies in San Diego were often full of smoke from forest fires, grass fires, and all kinds of fires. I mean, these clouds covered everything in ash. This became a common occurrence. And while it was difficult for everyone, the ash in the air made my symptoms even worse. We were stuck inside for weeks on end, and breathing this stuff was difficult. So if you're considering San Diego, look at what's going on with the weather. But this past year has been one disaster after another in regards to flooding. In conclusion, I'm saddened by what has become of a beautiful place. It still has great things about it, but combined with my MS, it's just not a fit, and I wouldn't move back. Stay tuned for the next episode. We'll
We'll be going east to a place where I finally get my diagnosis and have a much different experience altogether, but it's far from the end of the journey. Thanks again for listening, and leave any comments below. I'd love to read what you guys have to say, any good or negative feedback, and, hit that like button if you found this cool, and subscribe if you found it cool, or don't. Talk to you soon. Thanks.